This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Xcast X-Files Podwatch, episode 27, and today we're covering DPO and Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. I'm your host, Carl Sweeney, and I'm joined once again by Clara Cook. Hi, Clara.
Hi, Carl.
How's it going, Clara? How are you? Been watching a lot of X-Files episodes recently. How are you feeling about that?
Good. I have to say I enjoyed the ones that, for this particular episode, I had to rewatch. I spent quite a lot of time laughing to myself while watching them.
Ah, okay. Well, that's good. Well, let's dive in straight away then, because there's quite a lot to talk about, especially with the second episode we're going to cover. So, both of these episodes were broadcast in October of 1995. The first one is DPO, the third episode of the third season, written by Howard Gordon and directed by Kim Manners, and this is the episode in which Mulder and Scully investigate a series of deaths caused by lightning strikes, which they eventually attribute to someone called Darian Peter Oswald, who, of course, is the titular character, DPO. So, just in terms of the placement of this episode, this comes hot on the heels of the Anasazi, Blessing Way, Paperclip trilogy. So, I don't want to say a come down from that, but, after you've had this big, epic, conspiratorial storyline that's had, recurring characters die and lots of intrigue and double plotting and stuff, here you've got a more straightforward, standalone Monster of the Week, whatever you want to call it, straight afterwards. And they even allude to that in the episode where Scully says, please promise me this has nothing to do with UFOs and government conspiracies or something. How successful is the episode? What are your overall thoughts, Clara?
Well, I think it does suffer from being a bit of a come down after such a great mythic trilogy. I think that's just where it was spliced, where it was put in. So can't blame the episode too much for that. But yeah, it's not a big story. It's a small story. It's a small story about a small town and particularly a small town failure. Darren is just a real loser, and I mean, I hate to say that because I don't like calling anybody a loser, and I think you do feel a little bit sorry for him at points during the episode, but he's really unimaginative. He's gained this new power, which is to control electricity and lightning, and he lives the same life as he did before he gained the power. He's not got the imagination in which to actually do anything with it. He wants to use his power to impress his teacher, his old teacher, who he's kind of fallen in love with, he's got a crush on, but he can't decide whether or not to kill her husband or save her husband, so he does both. He's just I would say he's not a hugely inspirational person, but he's also not a big villain either. He's just a bit of a sad sack with exceptional powers. I think that's the point of it, though. I think that's the point of the episode, to take somebody who is like a slacker, give them this power and see what they would do with it, and the result is, well, not a huge amount. I mean, he's a bit dumb, really. He kind of even lets on to Mulder and Scully that he's actually involved, almost from the first moment that Mulder meets him. He's already acting suspicious. And he burns Mulder's cell phone in his pocket. And, I mean, the cell phones, Mulder goes through so many cell phones, doesn't he? He's always damaging them. So he doesn't even try to hide it, if you see what I'm saying. He doesn't try to hide that he's obviously the perpetrator of the death right in the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, I think I like the fact that he's so unambitious and, like you say, he's got this kind of dearth of imagination. I don't know if it's because I find that very relatable or what, but I think it makes a change from, it'd be very easy to portray him as some kind of supervillain or something. So I quite like the way they portray him in that sense. So, of course, this is Giovanni Ribisi as Darren, and his mate is called Zero, and he's played by a young Jack Black. So it's quite an interesting episode from a sort of before they were famous perspective. What did you think of the performances those two guys gave?
I think they gave great performances. I mean, I could see in this episode right away they were destined for long, successful careers in show business. I mean, I think they gave great performances. I think Giovanni Ribisi, is it Ribisi actually? Sorry, Giovanni Ribisi. I think he was really utterly believable. And the moments where he's supposed to sort of when he's actually trying to woo his teacher, when he manages at the sort of towards the end of the episode when he manages to sort of semi-kidnap her, and he tries to woo her, are actually really sad. He sort of says, we can pick any car you like, I can steal whatever car you want, we can go wherever you want to go. And you just think, oh, you know what, everything you're saying is wrong, you know, like everything you're doing is wrong, you know, you've got to understand you're never going to win at heart this way. At that point, I think you feel quite sad for him, and he just plays it really, he just acts it really well, this sort of sinister, but also because kind of sort of desperate, almost begging. And Jack Black, I think, does a really good job. Because he's humorous and he's darkly comic, but at the same time, he's also, you can see he's terrified of his friend, really, underneath it. And the idea that, you know, it's not a coincidence that he's called Zero, you know?
No.
We're talking about small town, people living in a small town who really haven't got anything to sort of push them forward. They haven't got anything really going for them. I mean, Darren's mother is really unpleasant, and she doesn't expect anything from him. She even says to Mulder, "Oh, he's not much, but he wouldn't hurt anybody." And that's kind of sad. The whole thing's sad, but I think it's deliberately that way. It's deliberately that way. Yeah, it's a story about a young man who is unlucky and then suddenly becomes lucky, or suddenly gets given something that nobody else has, but doesn't know what to do with it, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, it is. It sort of reminds me a little of the guys. Do you remember the episode Jesuit in season 7, which is the genie episode, where you've got the two brothers who, you know, that they've got these free wishes, but they've got no idea really what to wish for because they just haven't got the brains really, and that's obviously played much more for laughs. But I can sort of see something of that in these guys here in DPO. Yeah, I think it's quite interesting actually that his lack of ambition, his lack of intelligence, and everything is sort of. I thought it was quite a smart way to play it, even though it's not going to make, you know, the most dramatic episode in the world. But there's something there. There's something that is interesting about it.
I also think this ties in very well with our next episode as well, which is that we're going to talk about, which is these are stories of small people in little lives. You know, these aren't, you know, people in charge of huge conspiracies. These aren't leaders of world leaders. These aren't assassins. These aren't people, you know, these are FBI agents. These are everyday people in everyday lives who suddenly find themselves with an extraordinary talent or an extraordinary power and don't know how to deal with it and don't know what to do with it. One thing I would like to mention about this episode is the sheriff.
Okay, yeah.
I just found the sheriff really funny. He's obsessed with lightning and obsessed with the scientific properties of lightning, and he's like almost immediately quoting to Scully, you know, like, like I know more about lightning than you do. And he seems to, throughout the episode, have this like verbal battle going on with Scully, which at the very end she does actually win, because she's like, well, you know, they told you it wasn't lightning. Actually, I think at the end he actually ends up paying with his life. Doesn't he end up dead, I think? But he's very antagonistic immediately when he comes in, and he's just spouting these lightning facts, like almost like he's showing off. But he doesn't butt heads with Mulder. He like butts heads with Scully, and even Scully says to Mulder, like, well, thanks for stepping in, like, thanks for helping me out. Because Mulder just sort of sits there and watches the two of them, or just sort of stands there and watches the two of them argue. And I thought that was a nice little touch.
There's a few scenes around this point in the series where Scully kind of stands her ground against people who don't give Mulder as hard a time as they do her. I think of The Walk is one where she gets embroiled in a bit of a row with the like the general's assistant or whatever it is. I'm not sure. Yeah, but isn't there a couple of references in this episode to like some kind of facility where they generate lightning or something? I thought that was quite intriguing, but I don't remember them returning to that at all.
No, I think you're supposed to think that is where they're generating lightning so they can study it. So there's more lightning in the area anyway, and that lots of people were struck by lightning. Or not lots, but a few people were struck by lightning, and that Darren was struck, and he's the only one to really have survived. And because of that, and because of something to do with his physiology, he's actually ended up being able to use the lightning somehow after that. So it's about location. It's like a coincidence between location and physiology, which means that he has this power. But yeah, that's intriguing. Like the idea that they would attract all this lightning to the area, and that the sheriff's like, I have breakfast with the scientists every morning in the diner. This sheriff wishes he was like a lightning scientist. You can tell it. He doesn't want to be a sheriff. He wants to be a lightning, like a lightning man. You know that he does. Yeah. You know. What did you think of the ending of the episode with like Darren clicking through the
TV channels,
and the music as well? Like I can't remember what it was now, but it was something
quite heavy and intense.
Yeah.
I think that's quite an intriguing final scene. He's kind of like slack-jawed and passive, isn't he, in front of the screens as they click through. And then finally you see Chris Carter's credit come up on the TV that Darren's watching. So it's quite an interesting, self-reflexive ending scene, isn't it? And I mean, later on in the series, they'll sort of considered a medium of TV in more detailed ways in stuff like Sunshine Days and Ex-Cops. Yeah, I do like that final scene. I think it's quite a good capper to the episode.
Yeah, it's I felt almost in a way it was a little bit like the X-Files was asking the viewer to look at themselves a little bit. Like, here you go. This is what you're doing. You're also sitting there watching TV kind of mindlessly. Although I would hope you're doing it with more thought, because you're watching the X-Files. I wasn't sure what they were trying to say, but I felt like they were trying to get us to look at ourselves at the end of it a little bit.
Yeah, I wonder if it's kind of a comment on, I don't know if you'd call it Generation X exactly, but, that kind of generation who are often kind of pilloried, or the MTV generation, or however you want to say it, I wondered if it was kind of not a jab, but kind of a reference to that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe like the slacker generation or something.
Yeah. I'd just close this one by saying that, there's quite a few episodes through the run of the series which are about kind of angsty teens or young adults. I'm thinking of stuff like Rush and Schizogeny and Founder's Mutation. I think this is a pretty good example of that type of episode. I think it works well enough.
Yeah, this is a good one, I think.
But I don't know. I don't know if you agree with me. It's nowhere near as good as the one which follows, which is Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. So let's talk about that. So, Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, episode 4 of the 3rd season, written by Darren Morgan, directed by David Nutter. Two sort of X-Files all-stars, X-Files heavyweights, writing and directing there. This is the episode in which Mulder and Scully enlist the help of an insurance salesman to help them catch a murderer. The insurance salesman has the gift of being able to see how people are going to die. I think creatively it's a very successful episode, but also in terms of awards, it was successful too, because I think Darren Morgan wins an Emmy for writing this episode, and I believe Peter Boyle wins an Emmy for his guest appearance. So kind of a watershed episode for that reason, but mainly I think because it's such a fantastic episode to watch. What do you think, Clara?
Yeah, I mean, I love this episode. I think it's both hilarious and moving. It's a feat of extraordinary writing by Darren Morgan. It's just brilliantly written. The episode, yet again, like I was saying just recently, is about little characters or little lives. So it's unlike the mythic, epic storytelling and struggle that Chris Carter writes about. It's about ordinary people with ordinary ambitions trying to cope with their extraordinary powers. And in this case, it's like the gift of prophetic sight. Both the hero, Clyde Bruckman, and the villain, whose name we never know, who's the killer, are plagued by their ability to see the future. So if everything is predetermined, then what can possibly be the point of life? Why would you do anything? Because nothing you do will change the outcome of ultimately how you're going to die, what's going to happen, which is all predetermined, yeah? So I think that's what this episode is kind of exploring, and I think that's what Clyde Bruckman is wrestling with throughout the entire episode. He's an insurance salesman that sells insurance to people that knowing how they're going to die, knowing that. And there's a brilliant scene where he's trying to sell insurance to a young couple, and the husband wants to buy a boat, and Clyde Bruckman says, you don't buy a boat because, you've got to think about the future of your family, knowing that this young man is probably going to die. He knows how he's going to die. He's going to die in a car accident. And so buying a boat is a pointless thing for him to do because it's spending money that he should save for his death. But there's also something wonderful in the episode about the joy of living too. So buying a boat is what we should do, because if you're only here for a short time, you should be doing those things that are not necessarily wise, but are joyful. And the episode also, I think, explores that too. I mean, Mulder doesn't understand why Bruckman can be so disdainful and disgruntled with his gift, but it's a gift that Clyde Bruckman doesn't feel like he asked for or feels like he earned. He feels like he's just kind of cursed with it. And although he believes in predestination, he's also obsessed with these random coincidences that happen in life that basically lead to an outcome. Like he's asking, why did this woman collect dolls? He's confused about that sort of thing. And his predetermined his prophecies, like his gift of prophetic sight, is like it's sort of strangely wide. He's as much prophetic about the pie that Mulder's going to step in as to how Mulder will possibly be attacked by the killer. He's trying to figure out what type of pie it is. But actually, that's the detail that saves Mulder, because Mulder sees the pie realizes what kind of pie it is, realizes that he stepped in the pie, and then turns around so that he can try and confront the killer. So it's basically like Clyde Brookman's kind of deluged with information, and he can't really pick out what's important and what's not. So I like that aspect of that. I like the idea that somebody who is prophetic can't necessarily choose what's important and what's not. Like he says at one point, I can't see the wood for the trees. I thought it was really clever writing.
The whole episode, I think, is cleverly written. Like you say, about Brookman's gift, I think he says at one point that it's a gift all right, but it's non-returnable. I think it really does capture well that sense of what it must be like to be burdened in this way. It could very easily be quite uningratiating to watch as a viewer because, you know, he could turn out to be kind of a sad sack, but something in Boyle's performance kind of really walks the line brilliantly between being sort of burdened and weighed down by this and being quite amusing to watch. I think he wasn't the first choice for the role, but I think he makes it his own and he does it really well.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why he's not so sad sacky and why he's not so... Well, he's defeated, but he still cares, you know, and he's still kind. He's still kind. He takes care of his elderly neighbour, and he's actually a very sweet man. The episode is it's got quite a dark element to it as well, like this idea that fate is predetermined. You know, it's got these horrific murders in it, but it's actually really got heart as well. Like Clyde Brookman, when he foresees his death, he's not describing his death. He's describing Scully, like holding his hand and trying to comfort him or trying to care for him. Like he's describing a moment of tenderness, and I think it's the fact that he is so nice to her and that he is actually a real sweet person underneath it all is what gives the film its heart, give the episode its heart. But I think the story is actually about positive belief and free will. I mean, Clyde Brookman kills himself, but he kills himself before he finds out that Mulder's been saved. And it's actually the detail of the pie that actually saves him. And I thought the message was ultimately that no matter how bleak things seem, there's always a personal choice somewhere. And I think the X-Files is all about personal choices. Mulder in throughout the series has these overwhelmingly huge forces against him, conspiracies. I mean, Scully has these huge like health crises, but there's always a personal choice in there somewhere. They're always choosing to be brave. They're always choosing to make a personal choice, and I think that kind of is echoed in this episode. The episode's also hilarious. So, like the introduction of the spooky expert, you know, you think it's going to be Mulder right in the beginning, and it's the stupendous Yappy.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that actually, because this is quite heavy stuff thematically, like you've already mentioned, really. But you know, free will and determinism and fate and the random convergence of events and everything, but because it's so funny, and at times it's quite funny in a very broad way, because of that, it never really gets weighed down. So in season 6, you get an episode called Tivernus, where the guest star, Jeffrey Lewis, is similar in some ways to Clyde Brookman in a broad way, but that episode is much more kind of morose and somber. But here it's, like you say, it's flat out hilarious for much of the running time. Yeah,
I especially like the scene where they have the stupendous Yappy talking about, you know, the perpetrator and psychically figuring out who the perpetrator is. And then at the end of that scene, the detective in charge of the scene like delivers this APB, like it's a white man who may have facial hair, may not have facial hair, you know. Who's impotent, yeah. And he walks off like, he's like, right, we're going to catch this guy. And Scully and Mulder kind of look at each other like, oh, crap, you know, like. Yeah. And then like the introduction of like when Clyde Brookman goes into his trance and he says, you're going to find a body, you know, in the lake by the little white Nazi stormtrooper. Yeah, and then Mulder's sort of gesturing at it. Doesn't that look like a little white Nazi stormtrooper? That tank over there. And you can tell Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny are loving it.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, because Darren Morgan, I've seen him quoted saying, he said the same thing about Humbug actually, which is that this wasn't intended to be an amusing episode. It was intended initially to be a straightforward standalone episode, but they just couldn't help but write it in an amusing way, you know, just kind of it flowed naturally. I don't know, it's quite something to think about. It'd be a very different episode if you took all the jokes out, I think.
I don't know, I think it works with the jokes. I think in the face of a determined future, you know, in the face of knowing when you're going to die or how you're going to die, that's quite a dark thing, you know. You've got to, I mean, in the face of overwhelming odds, you have to laugh, you know. That's the only thing that can keep you going. So I think that's kind of, it's good to have the jokes in the episode. And I want to mention that it is the introduction of Queequeg.
Yeah, I was just going to run through a couple of things before we finish. Yeah, so obviously the introduction of Queequeg and the reference to Mulder's death possibly being caused by autoerotic asphyxiation. And this episode also started off the whole Scully is immortal theory as well. So it's quite significant for that kind of trivia as well.
Just a little jokes as well, you know, about Clive Brookman always losing the lottery. You know, a psychic who can't pick the right lottery numbers. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, I love this episode. I mean, I probably wouldn't select this one as my all-time favourite X-Files episode, but it would be on the shortlist, and I think you can make a strong argument that this is one of the finest hours they ever produced, if not the very finest. You know, I think this is a real highlight for the series.
Definitely, definitely.
This is another episode after DPO, which ends with an image of a TV screen, doesn't it? Because I think Scully throws her remote control or something at the Stupendous Yappies commercial that appears.
While she's on the couch with Queequeg. Queequeg is already on the couch, I want to emphasise. Queequeg is already in her life, you know, and poor Queequeg. Oh, poor Queequeg.
You know, they killed Deep Throat, they killed Pendrell, they killed Queequeg as well, unfortunately. Some of the recurring characters never had a long run, but hey. Anything else, Clara, before we wrap this one up?
Well, just to say that I think that the issues of like the sort of subject of predetermination and sort of psychic ability will come up later in the series, so I'll be interested to hear what other people think when they review other episodes, like later in, like I'm thinking of Biogenesis and stuff like that, and I'll be interested to hear what our Podwatch colleagues think of that when that sort of thing comes up.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure how relevant it is to tomorrow's episodes, though. Let's have a look. So tomorrow, it's going to be The List and Too Shy. So that's Supernatural Revenge and some dubious online dating in store tomorrow. So until then, hit us up on Twitter. Find us at the X_cast. Find us on Facebook. We've got a Facebook page and a Facebook group, which is called X-Files Basement. Thank you, Clara. But until next time, listeners, trust no one.